The Indiana Fever just pulled off what nobody thought was possible. And A'ja Wilson's reaction exposed everything wrong with the WNBA's golden child. What happened in Vegas last night wasn't just a basketball game. It was a complete dismantling of the league's narrative. And the aftermath has everyone talking about one player's shocking meltdown that revealed her true colors. Picture this scene from January 2025. The Las Vegas Aces, back-to-back champions, walking into their home arena expecting another routine victory. Their superstar A'ja Wilson had been dominating all season. The media crowned her untouchable, and Vegas fans were already planning their championship parade. But across from them stood an Indiana Fever team that everyone had written off, missing key players due to injuries, running on fumes after a brutal schedule, and facing elimination for the third time in 2 weeks. The experts gave them zero chance. Vegas was a 14-point favorite. The pregame shows didn't even discuss upset potential. They just debated how badly Indiana would lose. But here's what makes this story absolutely wild. Before we dive into the shocking details, if you're Team Fever and ready for this explosive breakdown, smash that like button right now and comment Fever Rising to show your support. The game started exactly how everyone predicted. Vegas jumped out to a quick lead. Wilson was getting her usual superstar calls, and it looked like another boring blowout was brewing. But then something shifted. Aliyah Boston, who had been getting destroyed by the refs all series, suddenly started standing her ground. She wasn't backing down from Wilson's physical play anymore. She was matching her bump for bump, shove for shove. And for the first time all series, the referees weren't automatically blowing their whistles in Wilson's favor. What happened next would shock everyone watching. Boston drew her first foul on Wilson just 4 minutes into the game. Then another. By the end of the first quarter, Wilson had 3 fouls and was visibly frustrated. You could see her jawing at the refs, throwing her arms up after every call, and getting in Boston's face during dead balls. The composure that made her an MVP candidate was crumbling right before our eyes. Meanwhile, Kelsey Mitchell was putting on an absolute clinic. She dropped 11 points in the first quarter alone, attacking the rim with a vengeance that Vegas couldn't handle. Every time the Aces tried to build momentum, Mitchell would slice through their defense and finish at the rim. The Fever ended the first quarter up by 7, and the Vegas crowd was stunned into silence. But that wasn't the whole story developing behind the scenes. During the timeout between quarters, cameras caught Becky Hammon absolutely losing it on the officials. She was screaming about the foul calls, pointing at replays on the Jumbotron, and had to be held back by her assistant coaches. The 2-time champion coach, who always preached composure, was coming completely unglued because her team wasn't getting their usual preferential treatment. The second quarter brought even more chaos. Lexie Hull, who had been a non-factor for most of the series, suddenly turned into a defensive nightmare for Vegas. She was everywhere, diving for loose balls, tipping passes, creating havoc that the Aces couldn't handle. On one possession, she stripped Jackie Young at half court, dove on the floor to secure the ball, and hit Mitchell for a transition 3 that brought the Indiana bench to their feet. Here's where things got really interesting. With about 5 minutes left in the half, Wilson tried to post up Boston again. She threw her usual elbow, expecting Boston to back down like she had in previous games. But Boston held her ground, and when Wilson tried to spin through her, the referee called an offensive foul. Wilson's reaction was priceless. She slammed the ball down, got in the referee's face, and had to be pulled away by Chelsea Gray. The technical foul that followed sent the Fever crowd into absolute pandemonium. What made this moment even more significant was the context nobody was talking about. Throughout the entire series, Wilson had been getting away with murder in the post. She was throwing elbows, hooking defenders, pushing off on every drive, and the refs were letting it all slide. The league wanted their marquee matchup, they wanted their superstar to shine, and they were willing to overlook anything to make it happen. But suddenly, in this crucial game, the whistles were being called fairly, and Wilson couldn't handle it. The halftime stats told an incredible story. Indiana had attempted 19 free throws to Vegas's 4. Boston had drawn 8 fouls in the paint. Mitchell was 6 for 8 from the field. The Fever led by 12, and the Aces looked completely lost. During the halftime show, the analysts were scrambling to explain what was happening. They kept talking about Vegas being tired, about them overlooking Indiana, about everything except the obvious truth that the Fever were simply outplaying them. The third quarter started with Vegas making adjustments. They came out in a zone defense, trying to slow down Indiana's penetration. For about 3 minutes, it worked. They cut the lead to 6. Wilson hit a couple of mid-range jumpers, and it looked like the champions were waking up. But then came the play that would define the entire game. With 7 minutes left in the third, Gray tried to thread a pass to Wilson in the post. Hull read it perfectly, stepped into the passing lane, and took off on a fast break. As she approached the rim, Wilson sprinted back and went for what looked like a vicious block attempt. But Hull, showing incredible awareness, pulled up at the free throw line and hit a pull-up jumper as Wilson flew past her out of bounds. The crowd erupted. Hull flexed on Wilson as she ran back on defense, and you could see the defeat in Wilson's eyes. From that moment on, it was all Indiana. They pushed the lead to 18, then 20, then 25. Vegas had no answers. Their offense devolved into Wilson trying to play hero ball, jacking up contested shots while her teammates stood around watching. On defense, they were a step slow to every rotation, arguing with each other after blown assignments, pointing fingers instead of getting back. But here's what really exposed the truth about this Vegas team. With about 3 minutes left in the game and the result already decided, Wilson was still on the court, still complaining to the refs, still trying to pad her stats in garbage time. She ended up with 31 points, but 20 of them came after the game was already out of reach. It was the most empty statistical performance you'll ever see from a supposed superstar. The final buzzer brought a scene nobody expected. The Indiana crowd rushed the court like they'd just won the championship. Players who could barely walk due to injuries were jumping around like kids on Christmas morning. Meanwhile, the Vegas players trudged off the court without acknowledging their opponents, without shaking hands, without showing any class in defeat. What happened next in the press conference would shock everyone even more. Wilson sat down at the podium and immediately started making excuses. She complained about the officiating, saying Boston got a special whistle because she shot 13 free throws. She implied the league wanted Indiana to win for storyline purposes. She threw her teammates under the bus, questioning their effort and preparation. It was one of the most pathetic displays of poor sportsmanship from a superstar athlete in recent memory. When reporters pushed back, asking about Indiana's strategy of attacking the paint versus Vegas settling for jumpers, Wilson just rolled her eyes and said, "Next question." When asked about Hull's defensive performance, she claimed Hull was grabbing and holding all game without getting called for it. The woman who had been getting superstar calls all series long was now crying because one game didn't go her way. But Lexie Hull's response was absolutely perfect. When told about Wilson's comments, Hull just smiled and said, "I've been hearing excuses from opposing players all season. When you play hard and win, people always have something to say. We're focused on the next game, not what anyone else thinks." The maturity and class from a role player compared to the supposed face of the league was striking. Here's what makes this even more significant for the 2025 season. The Fever are showing everyone that the WNBA's predetermined narratives can be challenged. They're proving that heart, effort, and teamwork can overcome talent and reputation. They're exposing how much the league's stars rely on favorable officiating to maintain their dominance. Think about what this means going forward. If Indiana can push Vegas to the brink without their full roster, what happens when they're healthy? What happens when teams realize that Wilson and the Aces can be rattled with physical play? What happens when other coaches see that challenging the league's golden children is actually possible? The implications are massive. This isn't just about one game or one series. This is about the entire power structure of the WNBA being challenged. The league has spent years building up certain players and teams as untouchable, using officiating and media coverage to maintain that hierarchy. But Indiana just proved that narrative can be shattered with the right approach. What's even more interesting is how this affects the MVP conversation. Wilson was the frontrunner all season, putting up huge numbers and leading Vegas to another strong regular season. But when the lights got bright and the pressure mounted, she folded like a cheap suit. Meanwhile, players like Boston and Mitchell, who never get the recognition they deserve, stepped up when it mattered most. The social media reaction has been explosive. Fever fans are calling out the hypocrisy of Vegas, complaining about refs after getting favorable calls all series. Neutral fans are praising Indiana's heart and questioning whether Wilson deserves her reputation. Even some Vegas fans are admitting their team got outplayed and needs to show more class in defeat. But here's the part nobody's talking about yet. Sources close to the situation say there was major drama in the Vegas locker room after the game. Players were reportedly arguing about shot selection, defensive assignments, and who should be getting the ball in crucial moments. The chemistry that made them champions appears to be completely fractured, and it showed on the court. The coaching matchup also deserves attention. While Hammon was burning timeouts she didn't have, and getting technicals for arguing with refs, Christie Sides was making perfect adjustments. She identified Vegas's weaknesses, exploited their lack of discipline, and kept her team composed despite the pressure. The coach everyone said was overmatched just schooled a two-time champion. Looking ahead to the rest of the season, this game could be a turning point for the entire league. Teams are going to watch this film and realize Vegas isn't invincible. They're going to see that Wilson can be frustrated into bad shots and poor decisions. They're going to understand that the Aces' aura of invincibility was largely manufactured by favorable treatment. For Indiana, this validates everything they've been building. Despite injuries, despite adversity, despite being dismissed by everyone, they're showing they belong with anyone. The young core of Boston and Mitchell is special, and when you add in role players like Hull stepping up in big moments, this team has unlimited potential. The bigger picture here is about competitive balance in the WNBA. For too long, a few teams have dominated because they got all the calls, all the coverage, and all the respect. But if teams like Indiana can break through that ceiling, it opens the door for real competition. It makes every game matter. It gives every fan base hope. What's absolutely hilarious is watching the media scramble to explain this without admitting they were wrong. The same analysts who guaranteed a Vegas sweep are now saying they always believed in Indiana's toughness. The same reporters who called this series over after Game 2 are now praising the Fever's resilience. The backtracking and revisionist history is almost as entertaining as the game itself. But let's be clear about what really happened here. This wasn't luck. This wasn't a fluke. This was a hungrier, tougher, more disciplined team exposing a complacent champion. This was about players who've been disrespected all season, proving they belong. This was about a franchise that's been kicked while down for years, finally standing up and fighting back. The momentum shift in this series is undeniable. Vegas went from overwhelming favorites to a team in complete crisis. Their body language is terrible, their execution is sloppy, and their superstar is more concerned with complaining than competing. Meanwhile, Indiana is playing with house money, loose and confident, knowing they've already exceeded expectations. If you've made it this far, and you're ready for more explosive WNBA content that tells the real story behind the headlines, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Drop a comment below with your prediction for how this series ends, because what happens next is going to be absolutely insane. The truth is, this story is far from over. Whether Indiana completes the upset or Vegas finds a way to survive, the damage is already done. The narrative is broken. The hierarchy is challenged. The league will never be quite the same after what we witnessed. And Aliyah Wilson's meltdown will be remembered as the moment the WNBA's carefully constructed image started to crumble.